Welcome to the Untethering Shame podcast, where we explore the complexities of shame and the stories that help us break free. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today we're diving into a topic that so many caregivers, especially mothers, wrestle with but rarely feel safe discussing: the loss of self in parenthood. Parenthood is a life-altering experience filled with joy and deep purpose, but it can also bring unexpected grief. We lose parts of our old identity, like the ability to be selfish in the truest sense, or the freedom to act without considering others. Many parents are left wondering, who am I now? This transformation often comes with shame. Shame for mourning the carefree self we once were, shame for struggling to embrace the role of parenthood, and shame for needing to justify our feelings with a disclaimer like, I love my children, but... Our guest today, Markella Kaplani, knows this struggle deeply. With over 15 years of experience as a clinician, educator, and now a mother herself, Markella has dedicated her career to helping people navigate the mental health challenges of parenthood. She has a unique, holistic approach to understanding the interplay of relationships, identity, and mental health, and she's here to help us unravel the shame and grief that comes with this new chapter of life. Together, we'll explore how shame keeps us stuck in regret, how we can embrace compassion and forgiveness, and why grieving the old self is a necessary step toward accepting and thriving in our evolving identity. So get comfortable, join in, and let's do this. Markella, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
I know we were chatting a little bit offline, but I feel like the timing of this conversation is so pertinent to so many people. So we are recording this December 19th, 2024. You know, wherever you are in the world, the weather's a little bit different. The circumstances are a little bit different depending on your religious backgrounds or what you believe in. Maybe what you're celebrating right now looks different. But there is definitely a pressure that comes at this time of year that I think is such a reminder, at least for me, of what being a parent can do if you're not willing to just take a pause and sometimes acknowledge our feelings, acknowledge the stress, acknowledge the external pressures, and all of the things that come up in it. And so I think it's just really perfect timing. And I'm curious because I love to start every episode just kind of doing an emotional check-in. Given all that's going on for you and your role professionally, your role as a parent, give me one word to describe how you're feeling amidst all of the chaos that comes at this time of year.
I'd have to say overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. But I do wonder because, like you said, do we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed? Is it okay to be overwhelmed and to say that you're overwhelmed? Because a lot of times that comes with shame as well. That if I am a good parent, I am supposed to really enjoy this time of year because I'm seeing my child or my children so happy that this should be enough for me to get past this. But what I say is we can be both. We can be overwhelmed, and at the same time, we can also absolutely adore their happy faces and want to do all these things.
Yeah, I even think about that, kind of the reason I wrote that phrasing in the intro of I love my children, but is it often feels like it's both can't exist at the same time. And it's I love being able to create this magic for my family, and I feel really overwhelmed. I feel sleep deprived. I feel exhausted. I feel like there are so many moving parts to this time of year, so many different people's expectations and norms. It's also, at least for us in the Pacific Northwest, we're in the rainy part of the season now, and it's been kind of warm. So it's in the 50s. It's not freezing, but I always get anxiety about what's January and February going to bring from a weather perspective. We can get ice. Last year, we had terrible storms that like trees falling through people's houses. So I have this like, is my survival brain ready for this potential trauma that may or may not happen that like doesn't feel like it's just anxious anymore? It feels like it's a reality that we have to exist in, but also like it's Christmas and my daughter's excited to celebrate that, but also she's asking questions. And what do we believe? Is this the thing that we want to perpetuate? And also, we're coming off a cough, and there are all these things. And I think this year's probably the first year I've given myself a little bit of grace in that, like with this persistent cough we've had, with a lot of the chaos when I've had to cancel a session or reschedule something with someone. I've been a lot more, I'm okay. And if somebody is offended by the need to have a schedule change, that's okay. They're allowed to have that reaction. That doesn't mean what I did is wrong. And I haven't had anybody that has been offended that I know of. People seem to have the same response I do of like, oh, thank gosh, I needed a little bit of a time in my day too. Or like, thanks for the hour back, or I've been exhausted. But I think you're right. There's a permission piece, and it's often we need to be brave enough to give ourselves permission, and then you can watch the ripple effect of how that can allow others to do it too when we're willing to take up that space.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I'm curious because, we're not a few weeks into parenthood anymore, but there was a time where we know we're going to become parents. We then become parents, and there's just this sort of like I wasn't a mom, and then I was a mom, and I had so much anxiety, like surface anxiety of like, is she going to sleep? How do I keep her safe? What are all those things? I had no idea about the other layer of identity shifts, loss, resentment, all these things that were going to come up. And because I didn't know when they did, my first reaction was to push them away. And so I'm curious for you, were you prepared for all of these compounding shifts that were going to happen when you became a mom?
No. The simple answer is no. And, I like to say, I give a little bit of a background of what it is that I do, because you would assume that a person who is a clinical psychologist, who has worked with children, who's worked with families, who's worked with parents. Of course, I got into working with parents and parent couples and that sort of thing a little bit later, more so. But even before becoming a mother, I worked a lot with families. I worked a lot with children, and I had individual clients. I'm in the kind of field where you would expect that I have some know-how or some kind of knowledge and background that would shield me. Of course, in all honesty, I was very well aware of the fact that it's a whole different experience when you're experiencing it. And I never had the expectation of myself to have some kind of a footing or to be able to handle it any better. And so at least I gave myself grace in that. I was very well aware that I wasn't going to find it easier than anybody else. But at the same time, it was a big slap in the face because the identity shift was not in my radar. I didn't know about it. I hadn't heard of matrescence. I didn't know what that was, which basically is that shift that we have in our identity. I, just like everybody else, thought of motherhood as yet another role. And so I was very successful, like most of the women that I work with, very successful in what I did in all areas of life. And I know that may sound a little bit cocky, but I could handle myself and I could handle a lot of things on my schedule. And so I thought, okay, so I should be able, with a few minor adjustments, to handle this as well somehow. I know it's difficult, but looking at my track record, it will probably be okay. And that's because I considered it another responsibility and another role that I was willing and very happy to take on. I didn't understand that it would just change everything. And what we mean by identity change is that all of a sudden, everything else revolves around this motherhood identity. All the other roles, all the other things I used to be and used to do will not cease to exist, but they will revolve around this new person that I am becoming and this new normal that I'm setting. And no, I didn't know that this is expected. And so it was a definite slap in the face for me. And it took me a long while to understand and realize what is happening.
When I feel like the biggest thing, I mean, as you were talking, I kind of wrote down this idea of you came in with a humility and awareness of, okay, I'm a part of the human experience. My training isn't going to make it so that I don't have that experience. I'm not now an automaton because I have this clinical background. And I had this, it didn't come up for me when I first became a parent, but I think now, Everly is almost 5. And so when it comes to like mental emotional development, I definitely saw it pop up there where, again, I still had the humility. I knew my kid was going to have a tantrum, but I had a deep-seated shame that I didn't know was there that was like, but I should be able to handle it better than the client I was working with. It isn't that I won't experience it. It's that I shouldn't need to take up the resources and ask for help because I should have the skills within me to do it. And I think that created a disconnect for me where I didn't quite know that, one, that's bullshit. Like that's, again, coming back to the human experience, I am not then not in need of help. Like that is a beautiful thing to be able to allow yourself to have. And that shame was the reason I didn't think I could have it. But I think also recognizing that when you're so good at managing so many things, and people listening to this, even if they weren't clinicians, even if they had no experience with kids coming into this, when you feel like you've been able to take on all these different roles and you handled them really well, you could
Exactly.
juggle a million balls in the air, you've got a certain air of confidence that you don't realize is mired in ignorance, that you got this. You're going to be, how hard is this really going to be? Especially in a culture that says there's no wiggle room for you to actually say that it's not okay. You can't say you're burnt out. You just got to figure it out. And guess what? It's got to be easier for you because you have so much access to social media and all the supports and all the things to tell you how to be okay. And so the pressure just feels like from the beginning it's there. And there is no sort of wiggle room of saying, how do you feel? Gosh, you went from this person who knew in some cases people knew. I mean, I know it's different depending on how you become a caregiver. In my case, I knew for 9+ months I was going to have this baby. But then it's almost like people forget that there's still the shock when the baby's there and they don't ask you like, how are you feeling? They just go, oh my gosh, isn't this so lovely? I had my daughter right before the pandemic. So then it was, oh my gosh, you get to spend all this time with her. Isn't that amazing? I'm like, no, it's fucking not. I can't do anything I want to do anymore. I can't go out with friends. I can't stay out past 8 o'clock. I don't even know which end is up anymore. I can't wash a dish without being in pain. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I like her. I know on some level I love her, but I don't know if I like this. But now you're making me feel like I have to because that's what's expected. So then you go, I'll just stuff those thoughts. I won't say those out loud. Maybe it'll get better.
Exactly.
Was that your experience too in the beginning of like they'd pop up, but you just kind of stuff them because no one else was bringing it up? Or did you even notice they were there to begin with?
Okay, so I definitely had these kinds of comments. My son is 5, so similar timeline. And after he was born, it was about a 6-month period before we got quarantined where I live in Greece.
Okay.
Before that, he had severe colic. So even though COVID hadn't just hit yet, he was on me the entire time and he was fussy the entire day and then crying his eyes out at a particular time in the night because of his colics. Apparently, well, after he was done, I was told that he had the most severe colic that he could have. Nobody told me that there were levels. I had other mothers telling me that, oh, yeah, my child is colicky, and they looked fine. And so I looked at myself and thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle it? It's just a crying baby. And then after the fact, the pediatrician tells me, and she was seeing like millions of cases because she had her private office, but she was also working at the hospital here, the most well-known for children. So she had so many cases. She was like, I only have one case like him in my entire roster. And I actually told her, I was like, couldn't you tell me this while I was in it because I thought I was completely failing. I thought that I have such a low tolerance threshold that I wasn't prepared and I shouldn't have ever become a mother. And she looked at me and she genuinely said it. She meant it, but I felt like there needs to be some kind of psychological training for pediatricians to help them understand the identity shift that mothers are going through and how to handle that better. Because she looked at me and very genuinely said, I thought I would make it worse if I told you that you have the worst case possible, that it would completely derail you. I think watching you and your husband, you guys were handling it extremely well. And I didn't want to make it sound worse so that, I don't make it worse. I was like, no, it could only get better if I knew that what I was handling, that what you saw was that I'm handling it well, but I didn't know that it's that hard.
Yes.
And that it's not like that for everybody. And so I couldn't, but I know how bad it is to compare yourself to others. It's one of the issues that I work with my clients, right? But I couldn't help but wonder, how is everybody seeming so calm when I say that my son is having colic and everybody's like, oh yeah, we had colic too.
Well, it's bringing up a couple things for me. So one, I thought about this idea for so many of us, it's not just this loss of self, because I feel like the biggest thing is we don't realize how much space being a parent takes up. Now, everybody's ability, willingness, desire to factor that into their life looks different. And I remember before I had my daughter, actually, I was giving this presentation and I was talking to people about time, money, and energy, and how the way that we spend those is a reflection of either our shame-driven or our values-driven behaviors. And so really kind of exploring, where do we spend our time and energy and money subsequently. But I had made a comment at that point, again, I wasn't a mom yet, about kids being really inconvenient. And if she could have kicked me off of every stage for the rest of my life, she would have. She was so offended by that because she had older children at the time and was like, I would do anything to take care of my kids. They are not an inconvenience. And I'm like, cool. I didn't have a leg to stand on pushing back because I didn't yet have the depth of understanding. And so I gave her space. Coming into this and then becoming a parent, I stand by what I said. And I think that there's that degree of removing yourself or maybe creating your identity and having moved through or maybe suppressed your grief that had happened for her. Kids are incredibly inconvenient. That doesn't mean that we don't love them. Every relationship is inconvenient. My husband, if he needs something from me, I remember one day he got a flat tire biking to work and I needed to leave work to go pick him up and drive in rush hour traffic and it's raining and he is exhausted. That's inconvenient for both of us. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but I think we have this idea that we can't say that out loud, that it feels like an inconvenience to now have to factor everything around someone else, mixed with this other piece, which you described of you, me, and likely a lot of people listening. We were used to being successful, whatever that meant to each of us. We could excel. And now if we feel like we're failing, that is a threat to our identity. So the goal then is, I can't say it's that my kid is inconvenient. I have to love them so much and I have to profess this daily and be so fine. And I can't let anybody know that I feel like I'm failing. Mixed on top of that, you only really get a week or two where the rest of the world has decided something has changed and then they go back to normal. Then there's just this drive of everything's back to normal, right? You're fine. We're here for the first week. We want to see the baby and then we just kind of move through it. And so I'm just thinking about the context of all of those moving pieces that we're talking more as moms, but parents in general are holding this. It's inconvenient, but I'm not supposed to say that. I don't really know if I like this or not. Gosh, this is a big shift. I don't know how to make it happen. And the rest of the world seems to just be kind of moving forward. And I'm watching all these other parents and they seem to be fine. So what's wrong with me? I'm failing. Fuck, now my shame is up. Now it's a threat that maybe I'm not just a bad parent. Maybe it means I'm a bad, whatever your profession is. Now I'm a bad friend because I can't respond to any texts from people. Now I'm a bad child because I haven't reached back out to my in-laws or haven't done this. And it starts to really domino. And so I'm curious for you, just as I'm saying all this out loud, how do you make sense of all of that context swirling together? Why do we have such a propensity to just move, move, move? And for all of us to feel like the failure is such a threat and that we have to be normal and we have to be moving and everything has to be fine.
That answer is multi-layered, and I'll try to answer all the facets that I can think of at the moment. Well, for one, definitely our culture is very, especially in the West, but almost anywhere at this point, we value doing energy. So we're in a very masculine type of energy, and that energy is amazing. And I am not saying it in judgment. I'm a lot of times, most of the time, I'm in my masculine energy. And I think one thing that motherhood changed for me is that it knocked me into the feminine energy at a point in time that I wasn't ready to go there. And it took a lot of reconciling and a lot of accepting of feminine parts that I didn't accept because society doesn't accept them, because we haven't been taught that these things are good. We've been taught they're bad.
Yes.
And so being in flow and being nurturing and this ideal mother that we expect women to be is in complete contrast to the ideal woman that we expect women to be. The ideal woman does all these things. She proves that our gender is also just as strong, is just as capable, and she does all the things and she could do it all. So on top of what you were saying before, it's I have to prove that I can do it all. So if I was successful in doing it all, now doing it all involves me becoming a mother, because if I wanted to, and it's part of my nature, right? Factor that in. Now I became a mother. Doing it all means I'm supposed to excel at this as well. So we have a we have a made inclination, a constructed inclination toward perfectionism because of how we are told, we are taught to be in the world. We need to do all the things. We need to be efficient and effective and productive, and everything has to have some kind of product, some kind of an outcome that we can count and we can see and we can touch. It's concrete. And so then we get into motherhood or fatherhood, and we start to see that all the effort that we're putting in and all the time that we're putting in and the mental load and the emotional load, we are not able to see some concrete reward. We can only hope that we are raising good humans. We can only hope that they can see how much we love them. We can hope that this root that we are planting will at some point grow into a plant, but it takes patience that we don't have as people in the world that we live in now. And so we are experiencing the clash as women, that the ideal mother and the ideal woman are completely different, but we're supposed to do it all and we're supposed to be that at the same time. And we're supposed to be switching. No mother is completely happy. The mother that chooses to stay home, she feels like she is not good enough because she's not working, and she's not doing anything great because she could have been working, and other mom friends of hers are working and they're good mothers in her opinion. And then that comes in with the social media and what we see on the outside and what we assume is happening in people's homes, not knowing how much support they're getting, what their values are, how they're distributing things amongst themselves and amongst the family. And so we start to get into that bind. And then the mother that decides that I'm going to work, and she tells herself that I'm doing it for me, but also I'm doing it for my children so that they see a mom that also works. She's carrying guilt and shame when she is thinking about, okay, but what if my children needed me to be home more? And you get your hands on the wrong psychology book. You could build yourself up to think that you have completely damaged your children because you went back to work, right? I was listening to this interview the other day, and it was saying something along the lines of, your children are going to feel some form of abandonment from the beginning. There is going to be a form of abandonment. And that doesn't necessarily have to be that you're going back to work. It could just be your attention shifting from something else, and that creates a wound. And I get where the person was coming from. And he was saying something very real, but I'm thinking I have some background to understand what he's talking about. But
Yes.
I could also understand from the ears of my friends or my clients how this could be misinterpreted as I've damaged my child
Yes.
because I went back to work. So you can't really get it right. If you go back to work and if you're working, you are not a good enough mother. You don't care about your children. You just had them to have them and then you go on with your life. If you stay at home, then what are you doing with your life? And oh, you're staying at home and you're struggling and you have the audacity to say that this is difficult.
Right.
You can't really get it right. And it becomes a very difficult thing to handle. And whatever it is that we don't name and we don't discuss and we don't bring out in the open, it festers and it turns into shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like as you were talking, that idea, and it's interesting, I feel like only in the last 6 months have I really started to hear more people talk about masculine and feminine energies just more commonly. It's kind of like there was a surge of suddenly a few years ago where everybody started talking about core beliefs and limiting beliefs, and everybody sort of became aware of it. Shame had its kind of moment in the spotlight and people kind of pay attention to it. But I think there's such an interesting way of understanding. I like the way you said it as a doer energy. It's the idea that we need to be doing and producing, and there needs to be some sort of output. And so that pressure creates in us this idea that parenting is something that we can conquer and that we can find the right answers for. Okay, so this is the exact thing I have to do. And I think as from a shame, that like threat of failure spot, that's what we seek. Just give me the things to do so that I'm a good parent.
The manual.
Yeah, where the risk comes in. So then you find that random person on social media, you find that random book, you listen to that interview, and you're like, okay, if I can just do these things, then I'm going to be a good mom. I think one of the things we really don't talk about, and this is where I think that loss of self comes into play, is you have sort of I don't know, like a quadruple layer of grieving. So we're not just grieving, okay, now I have this child that I'm responsible for. And that's a big one. I remember one day in the car telling my husband, Jordan, like, I can never just decide to go out one night and just be out. I can't just like say, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. This looks like fun. I now have to consider this other human for the rest of my life. And that is grief. Like I have to grieve that because there's a loss of freedom that comes in this that is important I make space for. And then there's the grief we're starting to allude to of like, okay, so now you have to integrate this thing so your life can't look the same. But I feel like the third layer of grief that even feels more pertinent is the grief that the stories we had in our mind that we could do it all are crumbling in front of us. And kids are just like a catalyst to have to face it. Like everyone faces it, whether they have kids or not. It's just different factors that lead them there. But I think kids are just a really good, like in your face, you are never going to do everything. The cost is too high. You can't reach a top point in parenting where you're going to feel like I am a great parent. But because we're not talking about that as a layer of grief and realizing we live in a world that says you can, and here's the reality, you can't. And because we're not holding space for that, I don't think people get to grieve this feeling of like, I can't be perfect. I am never going to feel good enough if I chase this. So then they just keep chasing until they burn out. And then they end up coming into one of our doors talking about it. And the reality is they have made it a them problem that's really not about them. It's about that inability to grieve the reality of what all this has meant and to give themselves permission to say, then how do I redefine and realign myself to a life that works for me, making space to grieve these things, and then figuring out how I want to move forward. And so just thinking about those different layers of grief, how do you make sense of that for your clients? How do you make sense of that for you? And the importance of that space when most of those parents coming to see you are in the, I'm assuming, still in that fix it. What's the right answer so I don't feel like a failure? How do I not do this? Like, I just need to feel better. But the reality is they actually have to feel like shit for a little while to feel all these feelings and decide what to do.
You're very right. That third layer of grief is something that I had to work on myself quite a bit, because it's basically every choice you're making is the death of another choice. So for every choice that I make now, I am grieving the death of the choice that I can't follow because of what I just chose to do. And I wasn't able to accept that for a very, very long time. Quite honestly, I'm still working. I don't think I've gotten to the point where I would like to get. I'm coming to terms with it now.
Yeah.
Because we haven't been taught that. And like you said, everybody will experience different types of shifts in their life so that they can be, we're all called to develop.
Yeah.
But motherhood and fatherhood, they bring us at this point, they give us this opportunity for self-development that is like no other. Because they bring forward, motherhood and fatherhood will bring forward these shifts that happen that are completely inevitable. And it brings to the surface so many things that we could go on all our lives if we wanted to, blinded by, like, not seeing them. And that would have an effect on our lives. So if that isn't brought to the surface and we can continue lying to ourselves that we can do it all, somehow we are going to be met with ways that are calling us to change. That could be because we become ill and we start to have psychosomatic symptoms, or we start to have panic attacks. So you don't have to be a parent in order to be met with the fact that you have to change. But parenthood does serve a way that this comes forward, because you are met with all the things that you thought you had this illusion worked, but didn't actually work. So when parents come to me and they're facing these griefs, the first layer basically is even getting to the point of being able to accept that they are grieving. Because in itself, admitting that I'm grieving, especially for moms, is very shameful. They feel a lot of shame, and it takes a while to be able to accept that there are parts in motherhood that I don't necessarily love. There are parts in motherhood that I don't like, and that doesn't make me a bad mother. So before I can grieve the loss of freedom, I need to become compassionate with myself that I want this freedom and I need this freedom, and that's okay. Because what I'm usually faced with is people being very hard on themselves and saying, well, for the most part, I'm working with people who made a conscious choice to become a parent, right?
Yes.
And so I made a conscious choice to become a parent and conceive. But even the people who got pregnant and decided to keep the pregnancy, they're saying, I made a conscious choice to keep it. So I should be fine with it. And should rings, red flag. Well, you can make a choice, and all choices have some form of consequence, but we don't seem to be okay with that in parenthood. In some forms, we might be okay with it. We might say, okay, I made a choice to get this promotion, but it meant changing countries, and it's hard on my friendships, for example. But, you can't have it all. But with parenthood, somehow we're supposed to be able to have it all. And so there needs to be space to understand that this is not unlike any other choice that you've made, that it doesn't make you a bad human and a bad parent if you decide that, oh my God, yeah, sometimes it feels like I don't have freedom. I read this meme the other day, and it was very nice. It was kind of like, up until teenagers were moving out from our parents' homes, we had to tell others where we're going, why we're going, when we're coming back. And then we had that brief time where we had the freedom to just do what we wanted without necessarily having to tell someone. And then we had children, and that's it. It's done.
So true. So true. And I think, I wrote down this idea. Radical acceptance has been a really big part of my own healing journey and a lot of the work that I talk about from a shame resilience perspective. And so radical acceptance being this idea of accepting what you can and cannot control, and then aligning your effort, energy, time expenditures to the things you can control. And a lot of that is when we think about parenthood, radical acceptance. I don't like every part of it. It's not like I can't control the fact that there are gonna be things that happen to my kid. Like, I feel very inconvenienced sometimes by, like, if she gets called out of school, if something happens, like, the nature of our schedules and my husband and I am the one that has to cancel my stuff to be able to take care of her. Now, on the one hand, I'm so grateful when I put mom hat on that I can be there for her, that she knows that someone will pick her up, that I am consistent. I love that I can design my schedule, that I can be at, I mean, granted, unless I'm like in the hospital and like very sick or something, I like knowing that I can be at every single event. I can do all the things. When I take the mom hat off, gosh, the pressure to be able to give that to her feels really high. And there are
Yeah.
some days that I don't want to fucking pick her up. I was looking forward to this 2 hours that I had to record this podcast interview or to do this thing. And now, again, mom hat back on. I love my daughter and I'm going to go pick her up and I'm going to do that. But mother hat back off. This part of me over here feels gypped. And I don't like that. And I think a lot of the work I've had to do from a radical acceptance point is all versions of me can't exist as whole selves. I have to integrate each of those versions of me in a way that allows me to best live in alignment with my values. And so there's often this push pull. Like sometimes I'd complain to my husband and be like, I just need more time to get these things done and do these things. And he's like, I hear you and I want to help you get that. I also noticed that a lot of the times that she and I are spending time together, you come spend time with us. Like you could go get these things done and you're not. And so again, I want to help you get this. I'm also feeling a little bit confused. And it was very, I'm still not fully there in acceptance, but it's having to get clear on, oh my gosh, my value is actually in this quality time with my family. But going back to what you said earlier, I have been indoctrinated in that masculine energy. I have to produce. My husband's a physician. I have this idea. I was raised by single women. You should not be dependent on another person, particularly a man. So I have this idea that I should make enough money to support myself and my kid if I need to. I don't want anyone to think that I'm just partnered with somebody and I don't, quote unquote, do anything. So my business has to be a certain level of success and status. And I want to have this kind of home and I want to do these things. And instead I had to come back and go, oh, this is actually really important to me. But this is calling on some of my shame about what it would mean if I didn't also try to have this other part of me exist. This part that says I have to be doing all the time. I have to figure out how to integrate those parts, which means I have to grieve that one of them needs to lose a limb. I can't have both full selves. Okay, that means if I'm going to choose, I want to be there. I want the moments. I want the memories with my kid. I now have to grieve the fact that that means success looks different. And it's going to force me to sit with some questions about that in my own professional life. It doesn't mean I can't have goals. It means my goals need to be integrated with these other values. And that I had to give a lot of grief to. Because when I didn't, and I was like, no, I'm fine. Now I understand it. These pockets of resentment would come up. Like I'd be fine, fine,
Yeah.
fine. And then boom, I'd find a way to make my husband feel like shit because he was not around and I was doing all these things and I wasn't getting time. Again, I'm not there yet, but I feel like that's the part of the grief that we don't make enough space for is I don't love that I can't just fly and go beyond. I love speaking. I love this podcast. I love doing all these things. I don't love that I have to say no to a lot of stuff. But I do love that I am at every one of these events with my daughter and that I love going and doing these things with her. Both of those realities can exist. And at my core, the choice I'm making and how I spend my time in those moments, at least now, I'm sure there will be times that will challenge me later. I've been able to get to a place where I make the decision from values, not from shame. But I wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't start the grieving process.
Yes. And in your example, with what you're saying. I don't know if it's true for you, but I am going to use what you said as an example. There's also the fear that was brought up that could be calling to be addressed. And again, I'm not sure that this would be a fear on your end, but there is this fear of depending on someone. There
Oh,
is this
absolutely.
lack of trust. And
Yes.
I could get by in a relationship somehow, of course, to a degree and to an extent, with having this fear of trust.
Mhm.
And because of this individualism that we're all taught, you should be able to do it yourself. And especially for women, it's very
Yes.
true that feminism has moved us forward in many ways, and I'm grateful for the feminist movement. At the same time, it has created certain polarizing opinions and ways that we are thinking that we should be in order to defend our honor and never allow ourselves to ever become manipulated or to be less than. And so that puts a lot of pressure in order to be self-sufficient at any point, which at the same time then creates a rift in our relationships. Because if in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, how do I have a way out, is basically saying, I am not sure I can ever trust you fully. And if that is lacking, connection is lacking. And then motherhood then brings along this question, oh, I want to spend more time. That would mean working less. That would mean depending on my husband. I couldn't be completely self-sufficient. And what does that mean about me? What does that mean about having to rely on someone? I've had to face it the past couple of years myself. Mandatorily here in Greece, preschool 2021 became mandatory, whereas it wasn't. And so I knew that at 4 years old, he would have to go to school. And I mainly worked afternoons. And I decided that I don't want him gone all morning and me then to leave in the afternoon. I had spent all day with him up until he was 4. And I realized for myself that I wouldn't be okay with it.
Yes.
And so in order to protect my emotional aspect, I had to be met with, a very loving husband who said, great, I've been wanting to be a support for you. You've been a support for me. Lean on me. And it took me a very long time and a trip back into the therapist's office to be able to accept his support without resenting myself, without resenting the situation, without thinking, well, other moms seem to be okay and they're not ashamed of the fact that they're gone for so many hours, and good on them. Like, they shouldn't be. But what is wrong with me? Am I leading with shame? Is it fear? Is it that I really want to be here? Or there were so many questions not allowing me, even though I chose to stay home to be with my son, they weren't allowing me to fully embrace that choice. They were shaming me into, oh, yeah, now you have to rely. And then what happens? And who are you now that you're not the self-reliant person that you always prided yourself in being? It brings up a lot of childhood stuff.
Yeah.
And so I work a lot with the inner child a lot of times. And the way that we treat ourselves and the way that we treat our children a lot of times goes against our inner child, and we start to kick back, and we don't understand why we're kicking back and why we're holding resentment, because our inner child is the one that's actually the one who's kicking back. If you are going to treat your daughter with compassion, if you're going to give her room and space, if you're going to devote time to her with no distractions, with calmness and flow, but then you turn to yourself and you're like, no, you've got no permission to cancel. No, you're going to pull an all-nighter in order to achieve this because shame on you. You should have done it earlier. Know this, know that. You're very hard on yourself because you want to upkeep the successful, ambitious, talented person to do all the things while also being a good mom. Your inner child says, well, you treat me like shit. You don't allow me to take a breath. You haven't allowed me for years. You've always been very hard on me. But now I'm watching you. It's like an older sibling that's watching you with a younger child. And it's saying, well, mommy, you're treating her very nicely, but you never treated me that way. So what's going to happen? It's going to throw a fit. It's going to have a tantrum, and it's going to go against you when you are trying to achieve all these things. It's going to go against you and say, no, well, it rebels.
Oh, that's such an interesting. I mean, I often think about children being the mirror that invites a lot of this inner child work and healing. But that's another layer of it that I haven't thought about before, which is it's not just, this brings up this thing for me, or there's this part of me. And a lot of times I think the inner child healing that is talked about on the surface when we think about parenting, and not even that it's a surface, but the more common sort of input is parenting from a place of defense to not be like our parents, and the pressure that we can put on ourselves and all of those pieces that come into play, or when something that happens with our kid triggers this thing in us from when we were kids. But I think that idea of me versus me instead of me with me at the end of the day, and I was doing that for, I mean, at least a year and a half, 2 years, where it was that piece where it's like, okay, you are full in mom mode for this time. Like, these are your values. And I'd gotten to a place where it's like, I'm okay with this. And then these are my work times, and I'm going to go full into this. And it was little things, even like, well, when she goes to bed, that's another hour to 2 hours that I have to get things done. Okay, bedtime's at 8:00. Now that she's in bed, then by 8:15, I'll have the few things done that I need to in the kitchen. I'll be able to go and I'll get this done. Okay, from 8:15 to this time, I'll do this thing. And you would have such a rigidity. And then if she would wake up or get out of bed or have a boundary pushback, as toddlers and emerging young children are supposed to do. I mean, all children are, but particularly at this age where they're finding their independence, they're finding their voice, I'd be pissed and I'd be upset at her. And then I would berate myself because I would end up being exhausted or tired. So now I'm shaming myself for being a shitty mom because I wasn't patient and compassionate with her anymore because you had till 8. I took the mom hat off. Damn it. Now you're asking me to put it back on. So that part. And then the shame of, well, now you're not going to get these things done. And it's all of that. And I think you're right. There's this piece of reflection on the inner child. And it's bringing me to this idea, because I know we're close on time, but this idea, you mentioned it a couple times about compassion. And it feels like compassion is a really key part of, even prior to the grief process, even the idea of exploring our feelings. But then in that grief process, it's this sort of compassion and curiosity of, really a lot of it is asking the questions, what am I feeling? And where is this coming from? And how do I sit with this? And so I'm just curious about this for people that are listening. Some of them are going to be maybe expecting parents. Some are never going to be parents. They don't want children. My guess is that a lot of people are going to be in sort of that mid-range. They don't necessarily have newborns. So they've got maybe kids our age, they've got teenagers, or now they have adult children and they're like, fuck, I didn't do any of this stuff. I never grieved it. Did I, like you said with that interview, did I screw up my children? And now they've got abandonment issues and all of that. And so, one, what would you say to the people that are at different parts in the timeline feeling like, I should have done this sooner? I should have known these things. I should have made more space for this. They're shaming themselves for their lack of knowing they had shame in the first place. And then 2, what is the sort of next step we can invite people on, regardless of where they're at in their timeline, so they can start to just bring some of that compassion and curiosity in to even figure out what the next step is for them in their own healing process?
I'm glad that you're mentioning this, because it is true that even our conversation could lead to shame. The first thing here would be to consider that we can feel shameful about just about anything. But the problem is that we can't turn back time. And the positive is there's always time to repair. You can repair at any point in time. Shame, however, will not let you repair. What shame does is it draws us inward and it makes us shush. It makes us not want to say what it is that we're feeling and we're thinking out loud, because it's not good. And we are going to be guilt tripped over it. We think that we're going to be abandoned because of it. We think that if I turn to my child and say, hey, you know what, maybe I was hard on you, for example, when you were in school. If we say it, there is this misconception that we make it true, and that maybe my child wasn't thinking that. Maybe my child didn't have a grievance over it. And then if I go and I apologize and I try to repair, maybe I'm making a problem that doesn't exist. That is the excuse that we give ourselves because we are ashamed of talking about it, because of all the feelings and because of the fear of rejection. Because as parents, we also fear being rejected by our children. So it's important to first crush that misconception that it can make something worse. At the worst case scenario, your child could turn and say, no, it's fine. It won't make anything worse.
Right.
At best case scenario, your child will feel acknowledged. They will feel validated. And this can be if your child is 40 and if your child is 4. They will feel validated, they will feel seen, and they will accept this as an apology and as a way of, I understand and I'm trying to do better. I really don't like the psychoanalytic thought of personality forms up until 6 or 7, whatever you've done up until then, and especially the first 3 years, your child is done, the clean slate is over, you can't start fresh, and it seems like what they're saying is there's no way to repair, and your child is going to have to be in therapy forever because of you. I am not at all a fan, and research has been proving that this is not the case. We don't have to wait. We don't have to guilt trip ourselves into shame. Our brain is very malleable, and we can work on things and we can learn new things, and we can, at the same time, this works in relationships as well. We can definitely reform our relationships if we take away that pressure. But because this is very intellectual and very theoretical about shame, I also want to say that as I have been progressing in the field, I first started by being passionate about CBT. And while I am still not in the psychoanalytic camp, what I do have to say is that CBT, in my opinion, I use it and I find it very useful. However, if we just talk about the mind, we don't acknowledge that shame is also stored in our bodies.
Yes.
I think it's very important that we also make sure to understand that my mind may be saying, yeah, I get it. I'm not a bad mom. I understand. I shouldn't be perfect. There's no perfection. But my body hasn't gotten over it. And so my actions still reflect a tendency toward perfectionism, a tendency to shame myself for not being the greatest, most amazing parent in the world by, I don't know whose standards, by the books, by the social media, by whoever. And so part of this process is also acknowledging that it's not just my thought. I may be very skillful in intellectualizing everything and knowing the right things to say to myself, but it may not be enough. And that's not because you're failing. It's because shame is not just there. It's not just in your mind. It's all around you in the way that people will look at you when your child is having a tantrum in the store. And it's there in your body, in the shame that you have accumulated over the years and you haven't been able to resolve, whether that is about the specific issue about parenting or whether it's been from childhood up until now. It's stored there. And so in this case, my advice would be some form of exercise, some form of embodiment techniques like yoga, like mindfulness, moving our bodies, somatic exercises, so that we kind of have a holistic approach to this. You can approach it from various angles. When I started niching and focusing more into parenthood and motherhood and the identity shift and the shame that's involved there, mothers started bringing in their partners. Mind you, I hadn't worked with couples up until then, but I saw that a lot of the issues that come up for ourselves and with our children, we can't necessarily deal with either of those very well. We can't accept that we might have resentment toward our child or that it may be the reason why these things are brought to the surface, because it being the reason seems to ring the alarm. Oh, you don't love your child. You're blaming your child for your problems. So we block that out. We become blind to that. Then, of course, we're much more prone to be blind toward ourselves and the things that we're facing. And so a lot of times what happens is that it manifests in the relationship. And we're much more able to look at the relationship for two reasons. Number one, we can project onto the other person and it's someone else that's right in front of us. And number two, we feel less shame to go into couples counseling because it's not about me. I am not indulging. When it comes to, especially to moms who are very child centered, because of society, it's not that fathers don't love their children. But what happens is I shouldn't be using this time away from my child. I shouldn't be using this money that could be going into other things that are for the child. And by the way, I should have this in my bones and in my skin and in my genes. It's natural to be a mother. I shouldn't have any issues to resolve. And so it was very difficult for moms to come in to work on their grief because there was shame involved in asking for support. I should be able to do it. What's wrong with me if I need support? But there isn't that shame in couples work because I am doing it for my child. If we have a healthy marriage, it's good for my child.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think you brought up so many different pieces. And I think for people, my goal whenever we get to the end of a podcast episode is for people to go, wait, there's like 10 more questions that I have. And that's the really exciting part because it means we've created a sense of safety and curiosity to allow our brains to go into this space and to start thinking about these pieces and to explore it for ourselves, for other people. And I think you're right. There's this element of how do we move forward in a way that allows us to choose ourselves? In the beginning, sometimes the barriers to entry to doing that work are so high. So like you said, it's even this, like my mom who is in recovery, and for a really long time when she was starting her AANA journey, we would talk about how you can't get sober for me. You have to get sober for you. But when you have made someone else or something else your priority for so long, it's a threat to choose yourself. So like you're saying, I can't take an hour to go to therapy. I can't pay out of pocket for this person that I think would be really amazing for me. I can't do that. That's indulgent. I have to figure this out. I can't choose that. It's a threat to the system, not only who I have to be, but it means I'm taking away from these people I'm supposed to take care of. And so there is this accessibility. There's also this universality that's created if both people are struggling a little bit. And I think sometimes that's really helpful. My husband and I used to talk about it. Again, I'm in a heterosexual cisgender relationship. And so not everybody has the same dynamics that are mirrored in our society. But after we had Everly, not a single person has ever once asked him if he was going to have a second child. Hardly anybody asks him a lot of the questions about her behaviors. When somebody's handing information, it usually goes to me, not to him. I'm the one that they always call. And it's not because we've said, Kyira's got it. It's those subtle little things. And I felt so alone. Like after we had Everly, I knew I don't want another child. I'm good with this. This feels really whole to me. Like I still have my shit to work through. And that is, the invitation. But I didn't want another kid. But I was asked all the time about it. Don't you want another kid? Oh, she would be such a great big sister. Look at how amazing she turned out. You don't want to do this again? No, I fucking don't. But I feel like I owe you an explanation. And now my shame is getting worse because now I feel like I'm still a shitty parent to Everly. But now I feel like I'm a bad parent universally because shouldn't I want more children? I don't. I don't want to do that. And I remember carrying this alone, it felt like, because no one was asking Jordan that question. And one day I finally just I think I was so burnt out. I didn't have the shame filter on to stop myself from saying it anymore. I had repressed and suppressed too much. It just came out. And I was like, I don't want another kid. I can't do this. And I was like angry and crying. And he's like, well, okay. Like he had never had a thought otherwise. Like he's like, we haven't even had this conversation. I am good. This is a us decision and a mostly you decision. Like I am okay with this. Where is this coming from? And when I started unpacking more and more and more, I think it brought him into this is the difference in our worlds as parents. Again, I don't want to dismiss that there are a lot of assumptions and pressures on men that look different. There's a lot of very different painful realities that they have to go through in different ways. And there was this piece that felt like it was mine alone. And when he started to be able to see it and to hold it with me, it did make a difference. And so I guess wrapping up kind of what you said, I think there is this beauty in creating community. And sometimes for us, that community being within our home unit, our system, our partnerhood can be a great way to enter that and to start to see that they're not seeing you as a monster because you feel like you're a bad parent or you feel like you lashed out or you did this. And gosh, sometimes they probably actually want to tap in more, but they feel like they can't because they feel like you've got it and like they don't know how to help. And
Right.
all these little things that start to come up. And so we've kind of laid it out. One, we're saying the grief is there. The shame is there. You are not immune to it. You are trying to do this incredibly challenging, rewarding, wonderful, overwhelming thing, which is immerse yourself in this role of becoming a parent, whatever that means to you. And that comes with all those things. There's just no way around it. And then we kind of layer in, it's also going to bring up your stuff from your own childhood, your own expectations, your own pieces. The grief is layered in all of that. The reality of what it means to become a parent, the reality of your past experiences, the pressure you have living in a very masculinized culture. Okay, here's all this. Now we've talked a little bit about what we can start to do as individuals. How do we reconnect with that compassion, curiosity, that grace, getting our head back in tune with our body? I'm also thinking about the way that we can build community. And so I'm curious before we wrap up and we think about all the lovely ways that people can connect with you and all those next steps. What's one thing that you wish somebody would have said to you, or you still wish someone would have said to you that would have made it feel less lonely, less shameful, less like you were the problem? Sure, I'm sure the pediatrician telling you about the colic would have helped, but take that off the table.
Right.
What do you wish another mom or a friend or your parent or someone else would have asked you or said to you so that you felt a little like less like you had to bubble up and suppress those feelings and more like, gosh, I'm actually a really good mom for admitting that this is hard and that there are days that I don't like this and that there are days that I am resentful and I'm overwhelmed and I don't know if I want to do this?
I think it would have been about the identity shift. Maybe not necessarily in those words, although I've noticed that a lot of new moms work with the word identity crisis. I
Mm-hmm.
think if somebody had told me a little bit about that, I don't know how ready I would have been because I did work with expecting moms and it felt like I was bursting their bubble. So, first time expecting moms don't want to hear this and they don't believe it will happen to them. And what was interesting is that when I started doing this, because I got myself trained in matrescence, I had a client of many years and she was expecting. And so she was like, this is perfect. I want to work on this with you because this is the perfect time that you're doing this and I'm pregnant. And when we started looking into certain things, I created a program for her to follow, and we started exploring certain things that would come up to normalize them because that's what I would have really wanted, and that's what a lot of women who, after the fact, come to my office say that they would have wanted to know that it's normal to feel shame. It's normal to feel grief. It's normal to feel like you're changing and to not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
know who you are and what your values are and to question. It's normal to feel the competing devotions of, I want this, but I also want that. And to feel like, oh my God, can I not do it all? All of this is normal. And when I was trying to help normalize all these things, there was a resistance, which I felt was natural. I put myself in her shoes and I thought, I don't know that I would have been very willing to hear this. So, on the one hand, I'm going to say, I would have wanted to know that it's okay, that things will change and that they're supposed to be this way. But at the same time, I do know that I myself, if I were told this, there would have been a part of me that would have said, yeah, but maybe it's difficult for her, but you've got your track record to show that you can handle a lot of things and maybe it won't be as difficult for you. So I'm I'm answering your question. I'm saying, but this is after the fact, and I don't know how helpful it would have been back then.
I love this. And I love that sometimes it's this idea of, if we think about grief, if we think about trauma recovery, if we think about some of these big things in general, sometimes it is less about the question and more about the action that we take. And so I think I probably was very similar to you in a lot of ways of like, I don't really need your help. I'll be fine. And it isn't because I think I'm better than other people. It's because I feel like I have to have it together to even be in the same room as everybody else. And that's the shame piece. I have to play the hero card. I'm okay. Not from a place of, I've got it all figured out. You all suck. It's not arrogance. It is a protection mechanism. It is a thing that I have developed that distancing feels like it's the safer place to be. And so I think you're right. It is hard for us to hear that. It's hard for us to go, yeah, gosh, I might have that happen to me too. And so I feel like even in what you're saying, it's making me think about, for some people, it is just asking the question, what's the hardest part of parenthood right now? Gosh, what's that like? I know. And sometimes it's the relatability of sharing some of our own stuff and giving space for other people. But I also think about sometimes it's the action we can take to then just show up for that person in that moment and just kind of allowing them to feel like they're a little bit held, a little bit seen, even if the work is still theirs to do, because we can't do the work for other
Yeah.
people. We can at least create the space to know that if they did it and they chose that, we're not judging them. We're here. And I think that piece can, when they're ready, kind of allow them to go a bit deeper. Because that truly was for me, I think what allowed me to take the next step in my own piece is I did that distancing. Yeah, but I'm her mom, you're her dad. That's different. The weight is on me because I'm the primary. I have to do this. We've designed our life in a way like this is on me. Or with other friends, it's yeah, but I have to do this and I'm the therapist and I have this training and I've done these things. So I'm supposed to have the answer. And like for anybody, there was always a thing of, yeah, but, and always just a little bit
Exactly.
of a disclaimer. Once I let that go, it was nice to know that those other people had shown me that they would be there when I did. And then it gave me that sense of safety to do the deeper work.
Right. And like you said, it's not about arrogance. And I think in most cases, although some people have told me, yes, I did think I was better, it's not about arrogance. In most cases, it's about the identity that I used to have. So if
Yes.
my identity from my own trauma was based on self-sacrifice, and
Yes.
also because women are deemed good mothers if they are self-sacrificial, we
Yes.
think that I am not going to feel this way, not because I'm better than you, but because I've been trained all my life to
Mhm.
dedicate myself to others. And so this is who I am. And this is
Mhm.
who I'm going to be for my baby. There's no way I'm going to feel resentful. Nothing's going to
Mhm.
change because I was born to serve and I was born to nurture and I was born to do all the things. And so it's not like I'm not better than you, but this is what reality has been for me. So this is what it will
Yes.
continue to be. And we're not expecting that it's such a different ball game that it's going to question that identity that we made out of trauma, out of childhood past things that we haven't resolved, going to question how we parent ourselves. And
Yes.
it's going to make us realize that, you know, that thing that everybody talks about, like, oh my God, I'm turning into my parents. And I said I would never do that. How come I'm doing it? Well, you're doing it because your adult self is your parents. You've internalized their voice and you've been speaking to your inner child this way. What makes you think that this will not come out to your own
Yeah.
children if you don't reparent yourself?
Mm. I love this. This is, I think, such a great place for us to end. Listeners, again, I know that you're going, I wish this was a 7-hour, I don't know, mini series so that we could continue to dive into this. And the idea is to create these pockets of feeling seen, feeling held for all of us. So we can, again, shame can't exist in the light. And the more we build community and connection around these things, the more light we're shining on it. And as Markella said, shame ultimately is the barrier to repair. And so if we can say, gosh, this isn't a you problem, this is a universal thing that happens. And so your journey is yours and you get to go through your journey. And we want to validate that. And you're not broken. You're human by having this. This is part of the repair And I think the overall healing process that we get to do as humans. Okay, before we wrap for the day, Markella, where can they find you for all the people that are like, okay, now, since you're not going to give me this 7-hour mini series, I just need to go find her and get her in my life right now because I need to get the rest of these questions answered. I need some more support. I am ready for the next steps in my own healing.
You can find me at markellakaplani.com. You can find me on Instagram at markella.kaplani. Markella is with double L. And you might like to hear my podcast, which is the Parenthood and Relationship podcast. That will give you a lot of chunks of information that we didn't get a chance to discuss. Two of these being, I would suggest that you listen to episode 1 and episode 4, which are about matrescence and putrescence, because we didn't get to talk about dads very much. And it is true that they have their own set of challenges that we don't recognize. And like you said, it's really important that we understand ourselves, but that we also understand the other side. So if you are in a heterosexual relationship and you want to understand what your husband or partner may be going through, it's important to listen to their reality while also listening to what's changing for you and to normalize these things so that both of you can approach each other.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Listeners, I'll have all of this information down in the show notes for you. And again, take her up on this. Listen to these episodes. Allow yourself that space. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll then immediately go to thinking about other people's suffering and we'll go, oh gosh, I have to learn about that so I can fix it for them. That's not the goal. The goal is to learn about this sort of universal experience and to create space for all of our experiences to exist. We're not competing. We don't need to do that. We've been conditioned to believe that we have to. We're competing against our past self, our future self, all the people around us, all the other parents that we think are doing it better, our parents and all the pressures that we feel from them. We're not doing that. We're saying, gosh, this is hard for everyone. There are nuances to what that can look like. And if we can build more awareness and understanding, we can have a dialogue that allows all of us to feel less alone and less buried in the shame that really stops us from becoming our truest, most fulfilled selves and thereby most fulfilled and true parents that we want to be for our little ones. Oh, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I have no more words than that. I really appreciate it. Listeners, make sure that you share this episode with someone you think could benefit from hearing it. Of course, if you want to stay in the know on any new episodes, hit that subscribe button. And until then, just try to find that space. Take Markella's invitation. Let's reconnect with our body a little bit. Maybe just taking a moment just to be in everything that came up for you right now. And when you're ready, I will see you back here next Sunday.